Welcome back to the Wild Files, the podcast where we unpack the people side of MSP growth, leadership, hiring, retention, and culture. I'm your host, Jane Matthews, founder of Wildcat Careers, and we're here to help MSPs build stronger teams with the right people in the right seats. Now, today we're going to talk about something candidates are quietly becoming more and more skeptical about: MSP job adverts. Because honestly, a lot of candidates, well, they no longer actually trust them. And I think MSP leaders massively underestimate how much cynicism now exists in the market around recruitment messaging, particularly technical candidates. Because candidates have read, well, hundreds of adverts, sometimes thousands. And, well, after a while, patterns start becoming very obvious. Every MSP claims great culture, great career progression, friendly environment, fast-paced, exciting projects, supportive team, growth opportunities. Meanwhile, the actual role itself sounds like 3 jobs stitched together under one salary. And candidates notice very quickly, particularly experienced MSP people, because experienced MSP people know how to read between the lines. They know what overloaded environments sound like. They know what vague progression looks like. They know when businesses are trying to market chaos as opportunity. And honestly, this is becoming a much bigger issue in MSP hiring than many businesses actually realize. Because strong candidates are no longer just evaluating salary, they are evaluating honesty. They are asking, does this advert feel realistic? Does this business sound self-aware? Do these expectations sound sustainable? And would this role actually feel manageable? And if the advert feels vague, overloaded, or unrealistic, well, trust drops immediately. That's what we're unpacking today. Why MSP adverts increasingly sound the same. Why giant technical wish lists damage trust. Why candidates spot operational overload instantly. Why vague progression promises create skepticism. And what strong MSPs are doing differently. Because the best candidates are not looking for perfection anymore. They are looking for honesty. So let's get into it. One of the biggest problems in MSP hiring right now is lack of, well, difference. Some adverts feel like they were generated from the same template. You can almost predict the wording before you read it. Fast-paced, must thrive under pressure. Exciting opportunity, looking for a rock star engineer, varied role, fantastic culture, and candidates, well, they've become numb to it because none of it actually tells them what working there feels like. That's the important part. Candidates are not just reading adverts for information anymore. They're reading them for operational clues. What kind of business is this? What does the workload probably feel like? How structured are they? How mature is leadership? What does the service desk environment likely look like? And generic language gives candidates very little confidence, particularly when every MSP claims exactly the same things, because eventually candidates stop listening to the claims and start looking for proof. That's where many adverts fail. They market aspiration instead of reality, and strong candidates can feel the difference instantly. Now, I want to talk about one of the biggest trust killers in MSP adverts, the impossible role. You know the one. The advert looking for somebody who can run projects, handle escalations, manage infrastructure, support first line, own security, manage Azure, lead migrations, handle networking, own compliance, support users, manage documentation, improve processes, mentor juniors, and probably fix the office coffee machine too for 40 grand. Candidates spot this immediately, and honestly, a lot of strong people quietly laugh at these adverts. Not because they're arrogant, because they understand operational reality. They know sustainable MSP environments do not usually rely on one person doing, well, absolutely everything. So when they see giant responsibility lists with vague role structure, they assume overload. And usually, well, they're actually right. This is where MSPs accidentally create distrust, because businesses often write adverts from operational frustration instead of role clarity. The advert becomes, here are all the things we currently need help with, instead of, here is what the role genuinely owns. That difference matters massively because candidates are trying to visualize daily life, not admire your technical wish lists. Now, this part fascinates me because experienced MSP candidates they've become incredibly good at decoding adverts. They can read between lines constantly. So what do I mean? Well, for example, when candidates see must thrive under pressure, they often hear, this environment is probably very chaotic. When they see wear many hats, they hear role boundaries are probably unclear if there are any. When they see fast-paced environment, they often hear operational maturity, well, that may well be weak. Now look, I know that may sound harsh, but candidates are interpreting risk. That is what modern hiring has become. People are trying to predict future stress levels before joining. Particularly after the last few years, a lot of candidates have experienced burnout, a lot have experienced unstable MSP environments, a lot have experienced being overloaded quietly while leadership normalized it. So candidates have become understandably more cautious, more observant, and honestly, more skeptical, which means vague recruitment language now creates more suspicion than excitement. And that is a huge shift. Now, let's talk about culture, because this is another area where candidates are becoming increasingly cynical. Because every MSP, while they claim amazing culture, supportive team, people first environment, candidates want evidence now, not slogans. And honestly, well, think about it. I think candidates are right to expect that because culture is not what businesses say, it's what people repeatedly experience. So when an advert says fantastic culture, but the process afterwards feels slow, disorganized, reactive, confusing, well, candidates immediately question the authenticity of the message. This is why recruitment process matters so much, because the process either validates the advert or it contradicts it. And candidates trust experience more than they do branding. Always. This is also why MSPs struggle to attract strong people despite genuinely being good businesses. Because, well, the advert sounds exactly like everyone else. Nothing feels distinctive. Nothing feels human. Nothing feels operationally believable. And in modern recruitment, believability matters massively. Now, here's another huge one. Career progression. Every advert promises it, but very few explain it properly. And candidates notice because experienced people now ask, what does progression actually mean here? Not theatrically, not operationally. What develops? What support exists? What pathway, are realistic? What happened to the last person in this role? Those questions matter because vague progression language without structure creates skepticism. Candidates have heard there is loads of progression here 100 times before. They've joined environments where nobody had time to mentor, leadership was too stressed, operational chaos consumed everything, development conversations, well, they disappeared. So candidates now look for specifics. And honestly, the MSPs that explain growth clearly tend to attract stronger people because clarity builds trust. Vagueness creates emotional uncertainty. Now, I think this is one of the biggest shifts in recruitment psychology. Candidates are no longer evaluating opportunity. They're actually evaluating sustainability. That's huge. People want growth. They want learning. They want projects. They want interesting work. But they also want environments that feel emotionally manageable, particularly experienced MSP professionals. Because experienced MSP professionals understand what operational overload eventually costs. So modern candidates consistently assess, would this role feel stable? Would this team feel calm? Would this environment feel permanently reactive? Would leadership support properly exist? And interestingly, the advert often becomes the first emotional signal. That is why overloaded adverts, well, they create concern. Candidates start imagining late evenings, constant escalations, unclear ownership, permanent firefighting. And whether businesses intended that or not, the advert creates emotional prediction. That matters massively. Now, the good news, guys. Strong MSP adverts are actually surprisingly simple. They're not louder, they're clearer. The best adverts, well, they sound human. They explain reality. They describe operational structure. They clarify ownership. They set realistic expectations. And more importantly, well, they sound believable. This is massive because believable businesses create and attract trust. Strong MSP adverts also explain what success looks like, what support exists, how teams are structured, what the workload realistically feels like, and what growth genuinely means. That level of honesty massively differentiates businesses now because honesty feels refreshing in modern recruitment, particularly inside MSP hiring where candidates have become incredibly skeptical. Strong adverts also avoid trying to impress technically. This is important. Many adverts become giant lists of technology. See, candidates do not actually necessarily find that attractive. Often they think, this environment sounds exhausting, and that is a very different emotional response. Now, this is where things become really important because there is a huge difference between recruitment marketing and recruitment reality. Some MSPs try to market themselves as environments they are not operationally ready to support. And that creates mismatch. And mismatch destroys retention. This is why honesty matters so much, because attracting the wrong expectations creates future disappointment. And disappointment, well, that destroys trust quickly. I genuinely think one of the smartest things MSPs can do right now is stop trying to sound perfect. Candidates do not trust perfect anymore. Perfect, well, it sounds fake, doesn't it? What candidates actually trust, well, that's clarity, self-awareness, operational honesty, humanity. That's what builds credibility. I think MSP recruitment is entering a really interesting phase because candidates are becoming much more emotionally intelligent buyers of opportunity. They're analysing operational maturity, leadership stability, workload realism, communication quality, emotional sustainability. And job adverts are often the very place candidates begin gathering those signals. That means, adverts matter far more than many MSP businesses realise. Not because they need to sound exciting, but because they actually need to sound believable. And that is the shift. The MSPs attracting the strongest people long term are usually not the businesses making the biggest promises. They are the businesses that communicate the clearest reality. And candidates trust that difference immediately. So that's it for today's episode of The Wild Files. If this episode made you want to completely rewrite your job adverts, honestly, good. Because candidates are reading far more between the lines than most MSPs realise. And the businesses winning trust long term are usually the ones brave enough to communicate honestly. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with another MSP leader who's still searching for a rock star engineer who thrives under pressure. And if you want more conversations around hiring, leadership, retention, and operational stability inside MSPs, make sure you subscribe. Until next time, stay intentional, stay structured, and as always, stay wild.